guys, in today's video lesson we are reviewing multiple representations and we will be learning how to put those all together into four corners. First, let's review how to write an equation from a table. When you are given a table, you can write an equation. Step 1 is to compare the x and y values to find a pattern. Step 2 is to use the pattern to write an equation. We will express the y value in terms of the x value. Let's look at two examples of tables to find an equation. In example 1, in the table above, the pattern is each y value is 2 times the value of x. Each y value is 2 times the value of x. We can take x and multiply by 2 each times to get to y. Therefore, the equation will be y equals 2 times x. In example 2, when comparing the x and y values, the pattern is that the y value is 3 more than the x value. So each time we can take x and add 3 to get to y. Therefore, the equation will be y equals x plus 3. Now let's try a few examples together. In my first table, I see a pattern. I can add 5 to each x to get to y. So my equation would be y equals x plus 5. In example 2, to get from 10 to 25, I can multiply by 2 5/10. I can also multiply by 2 5/10 to get from 12 to 30, and I can multiply by 2 5/10 to get from 14 to 35. So my equation would be y equals 2 1/2 or 2 5/10 times x. And in example 3, to get from 12 to 10, I can subtract 2. I can also subtract 2 to get from 11 to 9, and I can subtract 2 to get from 10 to 8. So my pattern is to subtract 2. My equation would be y equals x minus 2. We can also make a graph from a table. When you are given a table, you can make a graph. If the graph goes through 0, 0, our point of origin, it is proportional, and the equation will have multiplication. If the graph does not go through our point of origin, 0, 0, it is not proportional, and the equation will have addition or subtraction. On the left, we are given a table. Each x and y value represents an ordered pair. We will graph the x value first and then the y value. For my graph, I am going to make my scale on my x-axis go by ones, and I'm going to make the scale on my y-axis go by ones as well. Now that I've written my scale, I can start to graph my points. My first point will be at 1, 1.5. So I will start at my point of origin, 0, 0, move one space to the right on the x-axis, and go 1.5 spaces up on the y-axis to plot my point. My point will be right in between the 1 and the 2 on the y-axis. My second ordered pair is 2, 3. So I will move 2 spaces to the right from my point of origin on the x-axis, and then I will go up 3 spaces on the y-axis to plot my point. My third ordered pair is 3, 4.5. So I will again start at my point of origin, 0, 0, move 3 spaces to the right on the x-axis, and 4.5 spaces up on the y-axis, right in between the 4 and the 5. And my last ordered pair is 4, 6. So I will move 4 spaces over to the right on the x-axis and 6 spaces up on the y-axis to plot my point. Next, I will draw a line through all of my points to connect them. To write an equation, we can look back at our values from our table. To get from x to y each time, we would multiply by 1.5. So our equation could be written as y equals 1.5 times x. Our equation has multiplication in it, which means that our graph would be proportional. It means that our graph would include the point 0, 0. So if x equaled 0, 0 times 1.5 is 0. So y would equal 0, and we could go ahead and graph that point as well. In our second example, we have negative numbers in our table. So that means we will be graphing in other quadrants other than just in quadrant 1. So I need to make a scale for my graph. The x values go by ones, so I am going to make my scale go by ones as well. Positive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 can go to the right. And then I would also want to include my negative numbers to the left as well. And then my y values go all the way up to 8. So I would want to go by 2s so that I can make sure that all of my points would fit in my graph. So on my y-axis, every line will go by 2. I mark all of my numbers, positive numbers, up, and then I also want to mark my negative numbers down on the y-axis. And next we can plot our ordered pairs on the graph. My first value for x is -2, so I would start at my point of origin and move 2 to the left on the x-axis. And then I would go down 8, since y is negative, and plot my point. For my second ordered pair, I'll start back at the point of origin. I would move 1 to the left for -1 on the x-axis, and then I would move down 7 on the y-axis. And my -7 is going to be right between -6 and -8. My third point has a value of 0 for x, so I don't need to move to the left or to the right. I just need to go down 6 for my y value, and I'll plot it right there on the y-axis. My fourth point is at 1, -5, so this time when I start at my point of origin, I'm going to move to the right 1, and then down 5. And -5 will be right there between -4 and -6. And then the last point is at 2, -4. So I'll start back at the point of origin and move 2 to the right on the x-axis and down 4 on the y-axis. Next, I can connect all of my points together with a straight line. And I notice that my graph does not go through the point 0, 0. So that means my equation will either have addition or subtraction. If I look back at my table, I notice that I subtract 6 each time to get from x to y. So my equation would be y equals x minus 6. In our last graphing example, in my table, I see that my x values go by ones, so I can make a scale on my graph that goes by ones for my x-axis. And then I see that my y values go all the way up to 8. So I'm going to make my y-axis scale go by 2s so that I can make sure all of my points will be plotted. So now that I have a scale for both my x-axis and my y-axis, I can start plotting these ordered pairs. So my first ordered pair is 1, 5. So I'm going to start at my point of origin, and I'm going to move over 1 to the right on the x-axis and then up 5. And 5 is going to be right between the 4 and the 6 in the middle. My second point, I start back at my origin and I go 2 to the right on the x-axis and then up 6. For my third point, I start back at my origin in the center of my graph and go over 3 to the right on the x-axis and up 7, right between the 6 and the 8. And then when x equals 4, we move to the right 4 on the x-axis and up to 8. So next I can connect all of my points together on the graph. And if I were going to extend this line out, I would find that it would not go through 0, 0 on the graph. So that means that my equation is not proportional, and it will either have addition or subtraction in my equation. So if I look back at the table, I can see that each time to get from x to y, we're adding 4. 1 plus 4 is 5, 2 plus 4 is 6, 3 plus 4 is 7, and 4 plus 4 is 8. So my equation would be y equals x plus 4. We can also make a table from a graph. When you are given a graph, you can make a table to find the pattern. You can use the table to write an equation. In this example, I will look at the graph and the points on the graph to help me fill out my table. I notice that the graph goes through the point 0, 0, So that will be my first x and y coordinate for my table. Then I notice that there is a point when x equals 1 and y equals 2. There's also a point when x equals 2 and y equals 4. There's a point where x equals 3 and y equals 6. And there's also a point where x equals 4 and y equals 8. Next, I can figure out the pattern to get from x to y. When looking at this table, I notice that I can multiply by 2 each time to get from x to y. 0 times 2 is 0, 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 2 is 6, and 4 times 2 is 8. So my equation would be y equals 2 times x. For this example, we will again look at the graph to find points to plug in for our table. I notice that the graph crosses the y-intercept when x is 0 and y is 1. So I'll plug that in for my first x and y coordinate. There's also a point where x equals 1 and y equals 2. The next point is when x equals 2 and y equals 3. There's also a point where x equals 3 and y equals 4. And there's a point where x equals 4 and y equals 5. So next I would want to look at my table that I've written and find a pattern of how we get from x to y each time. So looking at this table, we could add 1 to x each time to get to y. 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 1 is 4, and 4 plus 1 is 5. So my equation would be y equals x plus 1. Now that we've learned all the ways that we can write representations of situations, we're going to put all of the representations that we've learned together into 4 corners. We've learned how to represent a situation in 4 different ways: a verbal description, an equation, a table, and a graph. Down below is a pre-done example of 4 corners. On the next slide, we are going to put together 4 corners for a new situation. The below situation is from our guided practice yesterday. It says the drama club is holding a bake sale. They are charging $5 for each pie they sell. Our X value is the number of pies that are sold, and our Y value is the total money that they made at the bake sale, or the total money that was charged. So we know that they make $5 for each pie they sell. When I see the word each, that tells me I need to multiply. And we're going to multiply by the $5 per pie. So the Y value in the description is 5 times the X value. This description tells me how to write the equation. The Y value is our equal sign 5 times the X value, or 5 times X. So we've written a description in the upper left-hand corner. We've written an equation in the upper right-hand corner. Now we're going to write a table in the lower left-hand corner. If they sell 0 pies, we multiply by 5, and they would make $0. If they sell 1 pie, multiplied by 5, they would make $5. If they sold 2 pies, they would make $10. If they sold 3 pies, they would make $15. And if they sold 4 pies, they would make $20. The last step in Four Corners is to create a graph. So we will write a scale for our graph. I'm going to go by ones on my x-axis and by fives on my y-axis. My first point is at 0, 0. My second point is at 1, 5. My third point is at 2, 10. My fourth point is at 3, 15. And my fifth point is at 4, 20. Next, I can connect all of my points together on the graph. And we have created our 4 corners for this situation. Next, you will complete some independent practice on your own. You will be given 4 corner situations, and you will need to create the description, the equation, the table, and the graph for each situation. Remember to ask for help if you have questions.